The air in the courtroom felt heavy, like a thick blanket. Every seat was filled, and hushed whispers bounced off the walls. All eyes were on Mr. Henderson, a man with kind eyes and a tired face. He stood tall, even though his shoulders carried a heavy weight. He wasn't there for a happy reason. Instead, he was accused of something awful, lying about his military medals. These weren't just shiny pieces of metal to Mr. Henderson. They were reminders of brave deeds and tough times, of friends lost and battles won. His uniform, though old, was neatly pressed. On his chest, pinned with care, were several medals. Each one told a story of courage and sacrifice. Yet, a judge, seated high above everyone else, believed these stories were made up. Mr. Henderson felt a knot in his stomach. How could anyone think he would lie about something so important? He had faced enemies on distant lands, not to earn praise, but to protect his home. Now, he faced a different kind of fight, one where his honor was on the line right here in this quiet room. The courtroom's silence was broken by the sharp voice of the judge, Mr. Thompson. He peered over his glasses, his eyes scanning the medals pinned to Mr. Henderson's chest. "Mr. Henderson," he began, his voice flat and stern, "the court has examined these so-called honors." He paused, letting his words hang in the air. "It appears these medals are not genuine. They are, in fact, fakes." A gasp rippled through the room. Mr. Henderson's face, already tired, seemed to fall even more. He stared at the judge, disbelief clear in his eyes. How could this man, who knew nothing of the mud, the sweat, and the fear, declare his hard-won symbols of bravery to be false? The judge's words felt like a punch to his heart. He had faced bullets and bombs, but these words, spoken in a quiet room, felt just as damaging. The shiny medals, which once filled him with pride, now seemed to burn against his skin under the judge's harsh gaze. Mr. Thompson then pushed some papers across his desk, as if showing proof, though Mr. Henderson knew in his heart the truth. The judge's harsh words echoed in Mr. Henderson's ears, each one a sharp sting. It wasn't just the accusation that hurt. It was the idea that his sacrifices meant nothing to this man. He remembered the cold nights, the loud explosions, and the faces of his friends. He remembered the moment he earned his first medal, pulling a wounded comrade from danger under enemy fire. The medal wasn't given lightly. It was earned with courage, sweat, and a deep love for his country. Now, standing in this quiet room, those memories flashed before his eyes. The Purple Heart, given for being hurt in battle, felt heavy on his chest. The Silver Star, for bravery, seemed to dim under the judge's cold stare. How could someone look at these symbols of his past, of his very being, and call them fake? A deep sadness washed over him, a feeling far worse than any wound. He had fought for freedom, for truth, and now his own truth was being questioned. It felt like his entire life's work, his dedication, was being thrown away like trash. Even with Mr. Henderson's silent pain clear for all to see, Judge Thompson didn't stop. He leaned forward, his voice growing louder and more sure. "These documents clearly show inconsistencies," he stated, tapping the papers on his desk. "The records do not match the claims made by Mr. Henderson. Therefore, I must conclude that these medals are not real. And if the medals are not real, then Mr. Henderson is not who he claims to be." The judge's words, "Mr. Henderson is a liar," hung heavy in the air. Each word was like a stone hitting Mr. Henderson's chest. He wanted to shout, to explain, to make the judge understand the truth. But his throat felt tight, and his voice wouldn't come out. He felt small and helpless, standing there while his honor was being torn apart. The judge looked at him with a cold, unforgiving stare, as if Mr. Henderson were a common criminal. The weight of the accusation, repeated over and over, pressed down on him, making it hard to breathe. He felt like he was back in a battlefield, but this time, he couldn't fight back with a weapon. As Judge Thompson kept accusing Mr. Henderson, a low hum began to fill the courtroom. People in the rows of seats started to lean closer to each other, their faces filled with worry and doubt. Could it be true? One person whispered to another, their eyes flicking from the stern judge to the quiet veteran. "He looks so honest," someone else murmured, but the judge's words were powerful. The whispers grew louder, a wave of uncertainty spreading through the room. Some people had come to support Mr. Henderson, believing in his good heart. Now, even they started to wonder, The judge had papers, after all, and he sounded so sure. It was hard to believe that a man who seemed so kind could lie about something so important. Mr. Henderson could feel their eyes on him, not just judging, but questioning. It was like a chill wind blowing through him. He saw the doubt in their faces, and it hurt almost as much as the judge's accusations. He had fought for these people, and now they might think he was a cheat. Just as the whispers of doubt grew loudest, and Mr. Henderson felt most alone, a new sound cut through the courtroom's heavy air. It wasn't a whisper, but the firm, rhythmic tap-tap-tap of polished shoes on the hard floor. Everyone turned their heads, their eyes following the sound to the back door. There, standing tall and proud, was a man in a perfectly pressed military uniform. His shoulders were broad, and his posture was as straight as a flagpole. On his uniform, a rainbow of colorful ribbons and shining medals gleamed brightly, showing a lifetime of service and honor. His face was strong, with kind but serious eyes that seemed to take in the whole room at once. He wore a general's star on his shoulder, a clear sign of his high rank. The man didn't say a word, but his presence alone made the courtroom suddenly quiet. The whispers died down, and even Judge Thompson paused in his stern lecture, his eyes widening just a bit as he saw the important newcomer. All eyes, which had been on Mr. Henderson, now shifted to this impressive figure. The general walked with purpose, his gaze sweeping across the courtroom until it landed on Mr. Henderson. A flicker of recognition, then a look of deep concern, crossed his face. This was no ordinary visitor. This was General Miller, a name known and respected throughout the military. He was a man of great honor and even greater memory, especially when it came to the brave soldiers he had served with. Mr. Henderson, who had been looking down, slowly lifted his eyes and saw the general. A small spark of hope, almost forgotten, lit up in his tired face. He knew General Miller. They had shared hardships and victories in far-off lands, fighting side by side. The general had been a captain then, and Mr. Henderson a young, determined soldier. Their paths had separated as their careers grew, but the bond of shared experience remained. General Miller's presence felt like a warm light cutting through the cold doubt of the courtroom. He wasn't just a general. He was a witness to Mr. Henderson's true history, a living testament to the very deeds the judge called fake. General Miller, now standing closer, could clearly see Mr. Henderson's medals. His sharp military eyes quickly took them in. The Purple Heart, the Bronze Star, the Silver Star. His brow furrowed. He then looked at Mr. Henderson's sad face, then back at the judge, who was still holding the evidence papers. A look of deep surprise, mixed with something like anger, spread across the general's face. It wasn't just surprise at seeing his old comrade in such a situation. It was the surprise of recognizing each medal, each ribbon, each star on Mr. Henderson's chest. General Miller knew these medals. He had seen some of them awarded, and he remembered the brave acts that earned others. The idea that anyone would call them fake was not just wrong, it was impossible to him. He took a slow, deliberate breath, his surprise hardening into a firm resolve. He knew the truth about these medals, and he knew the man who wore them. His eyes met Mr. Henderson's, offering a silent message of understanding and support. With a determined stride, General Miller walked directly towards the judge's bench. The courtroom remained completely silent, everyone watching his every move. He didn't ask for permission or wait to be called. He simply approached Judge Thompson, his eyes fixed on the man who had dared to question a true hero. When he reached the bench, the general leaned in close to the judge. His voice was low, a deep rumble that only Judge Thompson could hear. Yet, the general's face was serious, his eyes sharp and unblinking. He spoke for only a few seconds, but those few words seemed to hold immense power. The judge, who had been so loud and sure just moments before, now listened intently. His head tilted slightly, his eyes wide as the general's quiet words reached him. The rest of the courtroom could only guess what was being said, but the change in the judge's posture, the sudden stillness of his hands, showed that General Miller's message was important and unexpected. It was a private moment, but its impact was felt by everyone in the room. As General Miller finished his quiet words, a remarkable change came over Judge Thompson. His stern, confident face, which had been set in a frown for so long, suddenly softened. His eyes, which had been narrow and judging, opened wide. showing a flicker of pure astonishment. Then, something else appeared, a slight blanching of his cheeks, a subtle tightening around his mouth. It was a look of surprise, yes, but also a hint of something more, a touch of fear. The judge swallowed hard, his gaze shifting from the general to Mr. Henderson, and then back to the medals he had so easily dismissed as fake. The authority he had carried moments before seemed to drain from him. He adjusted his glasses, but it was not to see better. It was a nervous gesture. The quiet power of General Miller's words had completely shifted the air around the judge's bench. His face, usually unmoving, now showed a mixture of shock and unease, like someone who had just heard something truly unbelievable and deeply troubling. The papers he had tapped so confidently lay still on his desk, suddenly seeming less important than the truth that had just been whispered to him. General Miller then turned to face the stunned courtroom, his voice clear and strong. "Members of this court," he began, his gaze sweeping over the silent faces, "I believe there has been a grave mistake." He paused, letting his words sink in. "I am General Miller, and I served with Mr. Henderson." He pointed to the medals on Mr. Henderson's chest. "These are not fake. I know because I was there when he earned every single one of them." A collective gasp filled the room. The general's words were like a bell, ringing out the truth that had been buried under doubt. "The Purple Heart? I saw the shrapnel wound that earned it," General Miller stated, his voice firm. "The Silver Star? He received it for bravely leading our men through enemy fire, saving countless lives. I personally recommended him for that honor." His words weren't just facts. They were heartfelt stories, painted with memories of courage and sacrifice. He was not just a witness. He was a participant in Mr. Henderson's heroic past, a living proof that the medals were as real as the blood and sweat that earned them. General Miller didn't stop at just saying he was there. He then began to tell the stories behind each medal, painting vivid pictures with his words. He spoke of a time when their unit was trapped, surrounded by enemy fire, and it was Mr. Henderson who, without a second thought, charged forward to silence a machine gun nest, saving them all. That, he explained, was for the Bronze Star, for brave actions in battle. He also described a harrowing night when Mr. Henderson, despite being injured himself, carried a fellow soldier through rough terrain for miles to get him to safety. "He wouldn't leave a man behind," General Miller said, his voice full of pride, explaining the courage that earned another of the shiny awards. The courtroom listened, completely captivated. The judge sat silently, his earlier confidence completely gone. The stories were not just about medals. They were about a man's heart, his unwavering spirit, and his deep commitment to his fellow soldiers and his country. Each tale General Miller shared chipped away at the doubt, replacing it with admiration and respect. Mr. Henderson, for the first time in hours, felt a warmth spread through him, not from shame, but from the truth being told. As General Miller finished telling the incredible stories, a heavy silence fell again. But this time it was filled with awe, not doubt. Judge Thompson's face, which had been pale with surprise, now showed something else, deep regret. He slowly pushed his glasses up his nose, his eyes fixed on Mr. Henderson. The papers he had relied on, which claimed to show inconsistencies, now seemed thin and meaningless. He realized the terrible mistake he had made. He hadn't just called medals fake. He had questioned the honor of a true hero, a man who had risked everything for his country. The weight of his own harsh words, the accusations of liar, now pressed down on him. A wave of shame washed over him. He felt a knot in his stomach, much like the one Mr. Henderson had felt earlier, but this was from guilt. He had let numbers on a paper overshadow the true courage of a man. The judge looked down at his hands, feeling small and foolish. He knew he had to make things right. With a deep sigh, Judge Thompson finally spoke, his voice no longer sharp, but soft with regret. He looked directly at Mr. Henderson, his gaze now filled with respect. "Mr. Henderson," he said, his voice a little shaky, "I was wrong. Terribly wrong." He paused, taking another breath. "The evidence I reviewed was incomplete. It did not capture the full truth of your service." The judge then stood up, a rare gesture in his courtroom. "I deeply apologize for my baseless accusations," he continued, his eyes meeting Mr. Henderson's. "I apologize for calling your hard-earned medals fake, and, more importantly, for questioning your honor and integrity. You are a true hero, and I have caused you great pain. For that, I am truly sorry." His words were sincere, coming from a place of true remorse. Mr. Henderson, who had stood silently through the judge's accusations, now felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The apology wasn't just words. It was the return of his dignity, a healing balm after hours of hurt. The moment Judge Thompson finished his apology, a new sound filled the courtroom, not whispers, but a wave of applause. It started with a few hesitant claps, then grew quickly like a sudden downpour. Everyone in the room, from the bailiffs to the spectators, stood up. They clapped for Mr. Henderson, for his bravery, and for the truth that had finally come out. Their faces, once filled with doubt, now shone with relief and happiness. Some people even had tears in their eyes, so touched were they by the general's words and the judge's apology. They had watched Mr. Henderson stand strong through the unfair accusations, and now they were overjoyed to see his name cleared. The sound of their clapping was like a warm hug for Mr. Henderson, chasing away the last cold shadows of shame. He looked around the room, seeing genuine respect in their faces, and a small, grateful smile touched his lips. It was a powerful moment, showing that even in a place of law and order, the heart could still speak the loudest. As the applause echoed through the courtroom, Mr. Henderson felt a warmth spread through his chest, replacing the cold emptiness that had settled there. He looked at his medals, no longer seeing them as questioned objects, but as shining symbols of his past. The heavy feeling in his shoulders lifted, and he stood a little taller, his kind eyes now sparkling with a renewed sense of dignity. It wasn't just the judge's apology or the general's powerful words. It was the roar of the crowd, the smiles, and the tears of strangers that truly brought back his pride. Their clapping wasn't just for the medals. It was for the brave man who wore them. He had fought for his country, not for glory, but for freedom. To have that bravery, that sacrifice, truly seen and honored by everyone in the room, filled him with a quiet joy. He felt whole again, his honor restored, and his place as a respected veteran firmly recognized. The weight of the world had been lifted, replaced by the comforting embrace of truth and appreciation. For Judge Thompson, the events of that day were a harsh but necessary lesson. As he sat back down, the applause still ringing, he felt a deep change within himself. He had always prided himself on being fair and precise, relying only on written evidence. But today, that reliance had nearly led him to make a terrible mistake, hurting an innocent man and disrespecting his service. He looked at the official documents on his desk, the very ones that had seemed so convincing, and saw them in a new light. They were just paper, unable to tell the full story, unable to capture the courage of a human heart. He realized that true justice needed more than just facts. It needed understanding, empathy, and a willingness to look beyond the surface. He promised himself that from that day forward, he would always dig deeper, listen more carefully, and be absolutely sure before making any big decisions or statements that could harm someone's good name. This experience taught him that sometimes the most important truths are not found in documents, but in the living history of people. General Miller watched the scene unfold, a slow, gentle smile spreading across his face. The rigid lines of his military bearing softened as he saw Mr. Henderson stand taller, his eyes alight with newfound pride. The general's heart swelled with a quiet happiness. He had known Mr. Henderson for many years, had seen his unwavering courage and silent sacrifices. To see his friend, who never sought attention or praise, finally receive the honor he so truly deserved, was a deeply satisfying moment. It wasn't just about clearing a name. It was about honoring the very spirit of service and the bond between soldiers. General Miller felt a surge of pride, not for himself, but for the system that, even after a stumble, had allowed the truth to shine. He knew Mr. Henderson wouldn't boast about his medals, but now, everyone in that courtroom knew the truth. As the applause continued, General Miller simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement that justice had been served and his old friend's good name was whole once more. With the courtroom still buzzing with applause and the weight of injustice finally lifted, Mr. Henderson turned towards the exit. He walked slowly, but with a new spring in his step, his shoulders no longer burdened by false accusations. His eyes met General Miller's, and a silent, heartfelt nod passed between the two old friends, a bond of respect that needed no words. Mr. Henderson walked past the rows of people, some still clapping, some offering quiet words of apology or admiration. He didn't rush, but took each step with purpose. The medals on his chest, which had felt like heavy stones just moments ago, now seemed light and proud, catching the light as he moved. His head was held high, his gaze steady and clear. He was no longer the accused, but the honored veteran, his true story now known and respected. As he pushed open the heavy courtroom doors and stepped out into the sunlight, he carried with him not just his medals, but his restored honor, a testament to truth and the power of a friend's timely intervention. The courtroom drama was over, and Mr. Henderson, a true hero, had walked out with his dignity shining brightly.